and welcome to another Total Soccer Show Confederations Cup semi-final review show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who's wearing a jacket, but if things go wrong in the first 8 minutes of this show, he'll be taking it off. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. As much as I would like to yes and you, I am not wearing a jacket because I am in my recording room with the air conditioner off and the fan off. So, I'm wearing as little as possible.
Well, let's talk about that then, because will things be heating up for Juan Carlos Osorio after this 4-1 defeat that Mexico suffered at the hands of Germany in the Confed Cup, as the kids call it, semi-final?
I think things were already pretty hot for him. It doesn't seem like he's the most popular of coaches. I think, like, at best, people are sort of okay with him, and then I think you have a lot of people who are critical of him. So this will certainly do nothing to dissuade the people who are critical of him. And then I think the fact that he's bringing the squad he's bringing to the Gold Cup, he's kind of in trouble either way, because if they don't do well or they don't win or they get beaten by the U.S. in the final, he'll hear about it. And if they do win, I've already heard some people complaining that I think he has 3 defensive midfielders on this Gold Cup roster, and he had Rafa Marquez on the Confederations Cup one. So then there's already sort of the case building for like how he got even the rosters wrong before the tournament even starts.
Wow. In JCO's defense, it is a tough thing, right, to pick 2 rosters for 2 tournaments and try and balance that out. And then he'd also got the game against the US, which is a big game, right? The Hex game, not so long ago, and you've got to kind of factor all that in as well. It's a tough thing.
It is. I mean, and then on top of that, it's the Confederations Cup, which isn't, it's not Copa America. It's not even the Gold Cup where you need to win to, potentially make the Confederations Cup again. But it is tournament preparation, and I think the point that has been made pretty consistently is that this is the second time that Mexico have been eliminated in the group stage of a tournament in 2 years. And it's the second
semis. Come on, it's the semis.
Yeah, true. And it's the second time they've done that. Yes, it was 4-1. Yes, they got a goal. Yes, they fought back and had good possession. But it was still sort of, as soon as that second goal went in, it felt a little bit. I mean, we saw the questions and jokes about it. Is this going to be Brazil-Germany? Is this going to be Chile-Mexico? And so, it did feel like this was the second year in a row that they really struggled in a knockout round game.
Do you know what? And we'll get into sort of how and why that happened, right? Because that's kind of what we do. But there was a moment, I was just rewatching it before we recorded. There was a moment in the 19th minute when I think it's Timo Werner is through on goal, and he just drags it wide just a little bit. He maybe even has too much time after he's been put through. And I got the feeling if that goal went in and it's 3-0 after 19 minutes, then the floodgates might have opened and we might be looking at sort of one of those historic defeats. Yeah. I think, but as it stands, 4-1 is not historic, but it had the feeling of, we being Mexico, definitely not good enough against this team, and that's sort of a mark against us.
Yeah, because even Mexico's goal, it's beautiful. It's Marco Fabian on a rip with like a very intelligently taken free kick, or it's like taken short and then he hits it. But that's still, while that's amazing and that will make the highlight reels, it is still not like built from open play, and they kind of figured out how to break down Germany. And then outside of that, like Germany could have had a penalty that probably should have been given but wasn't. And then as you mentioned,
push, you mean?
Yeah, for the push. And then there were a couple shots that went just wide, a couple shots that were saved. It could have been way worse, certainly.
Can we talk about maybe Osorio's selection and tactics to begin with? Because in the end, for all the talk that we had, all I saw really was a 4-3-3, more or less.
I would say yes to some extent, but I had a hard time kind of really figuring out what everybody was supposed to be doing.
Do you want to hear my take was it's a 3-man central midfield. Hector Herrera deepest, like the number 6, which I'm sure we'll get into with the goals. I think is maybe a mistake against Germany, even Germany's B team. And then Jonathan dos Santos, or Jonah, as I learned to call him throughout the broadcast. You may have had a different broadcast to me. Was like the number 8, so he could go more up and down midfield. And then Gio dos Santos' brother is the number 10, who sort of gets more in behind the striker. And then Chicharito centre forward, Aquino on the left, replaced by Lozano later on, and Raul Jimenez sort of on the right wing, but then he would drift in and come and join Chicharito as a second striker sometimes. And basically that wasn't enough to break down Germany ever.
No, not at all. And again, this is where we go back to the point of like formations are useful in terms of being able to like succinctly explain what's happening. And I agree broadly with what you just said, but then you have those moments where like you would have Jimenez and Chicharito standing up top by themselves, and it would kind of look like, wait, is it a 4-4-2? Then you'd have moments where it was just Herrera with no one around him. It'd be like, oh, it's a 4-1-3-2, and people would tuck inside. And I think on the one hand, that points to lots of people doing lots of things. But on the other hand, when you lose 4-1, it points to lots of people doing other things, maybe because that's what they're being forced into having to do versus what they wanted to be doing from the outset.
Yeah, because I guess when you're Osorio and if you're maybe a Mexico fan, you look at that on paper and you're like, okay, Jimenez can like fill that right wing role, but he'll also come and play centre forward. And this feels very Klinsmann to me, is when you're asking a player to do two jobs, and he ends up doing neither effectively, right? Because he's not a winger who's going to get to the byline and cross it in. And if he does, then he's the one that needs to be on the end of it. And then so he comes inside and then there's no one on the right wing. And the only place crosses are coming from is down the left, where there's only Aquino and later Lozano. And one of my contentions for this game is that Yogi Löw sort of knew that whatever happened, Mexico would have an attacking left winger, right? Be it Aquino or Lozano or maybe Jürgen Damm. And so I think that's why he put Joshua Kimmich at centre right back. So he's like an extra fast centre back, an athletic centre back. And then Benjamin Heinrich as the sort of right wing back, who really, he's only 20, right? He's pretty quick. He got up and down, did a lot of work, and was really good one-on-one defending. He kept sticking Aquino. And I think Yogi Löw got his selection right and was ready for Mexico no matter what they brought.
Well, I think he was prepared for that, certainly with the Aquino being very far forward at times. I think the other thing that maybe he had very successfully figured out is that Mexico were going to have a makeshift left back if they were playing with a back four. And that's exactly what they had. They had
Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, he is not used to playing left back. That was what I read going into this game. I saw Tom Marshall write something similar, friend of the show, Tom Marshall. And it was pretty obvious that Yogi Löw also thought, you don't seem like you know how to play left back as maybe comprehensively as an actual left back would. Yep. Let's attack your side and see what happens. And what happened was 2 quick goals.
So Alanis is a left-footed centre-back, and it seems like that was enough for him to be pushed out to left-back. Is that basically the case? And I'm guessing so Salcedo started, or Salcedo, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, started the tournament as right-back, and Leun played left-back. And it seems like with Salcedo's injury, Leun has gone to right-back, and then Alanis has been drafted in at left-back. So, but the moral of the story is, have a backup left-back.
Yeah, I think so. One. I mean, we've learned that being American fans. We've seen the U.S. not have a proper left back and at times a proper right back, and occasionally a proper center back. It's a weird situation sometimes.
It's the Klinsmann thing, right? Yeah. Anyone can play left back. Turns out wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Turns out wrong, and very wrong in this situation. But I also think, with that said, I don't think Alanis is necessarily responsible for any of the goals. Yes, he plays a part, but it felt like he was representative of a larger issue again, which is that it seems like nobody really knew, okay, I'm going to step here. I know that that's my job. Oh, I'm going to drop in because that's what I've been told to do in this situation. And so that was, I think, really telling for me in how long it took me to really figure out the rough formation, because sometimes Gio Dos Santos was out on the left, and I'd be like, oh, okay, so he's playing wide. Oh, no, wait, now he's in the middle. Now he's up top by himself.
Well, he was a bit freer, right? He's wearing number 10 and allowed to sort of attack and wander around.
Right, but the thing that would happen then is that he would drift over to one side and he would vacate space in the middle. So then what I kept seeing was sometimes Aquino would come inside, sometimes Jonathan Dos Santos would try to step to fill that space, but that left space in behind that then you had other players, usually the center backs, trying to step into, and suddenly it was just kind of everybody a half second too late being oop, I need to get there. And so in that process of trying to close down that space and react, you're playing reaction soccer, and what ends up happening is goals.
And then, because the reason I think when you think of that, if you do accept that as a 3-man central midfield, the 2 Dos Santos brothers and Hector Herrera, the only guy you could really call a tackler out of those 3 is Jonathan Dos Santos. Jonathan Dos Santos, right? Gio's not going to do it, and Hector Herrera is much more of a ball playing, passing it around midfielder than a get your foot in and tackle in midfielder.
Yep. Yeah.
And you even saw it. So I kept track of this. Germany were just much nastier than Mexico. The first minute, there were 2 fouls as they stopped Mexico attacks. We just proper knock you over fouls at midfield.
And that's not a coincidence for me. Nope. Again, I think because we had talked about this in the preview, that it would either be Mexico coming out and looking amazing, as they sometimes do, or would Mexico coming out and looking a little bit hesitant and a little bit uncertain. That was why my prediction was that they would concede a goal inside the first 35 minutes. They did that twice.
I want to give you that prediction point, but it's almost like you underplayed it. You know what I mean? It was 2 goals in 8 minutes.
Well, but that's because, and again, going all the way back to the beginning, I think that's what's so frustrating for El Tri fans, is the kind of up and down nature of this team, that sometimes you think, they could come in here and it's a German B plus team, but it's a Mexico team that seemed confident. This Germany team hasn't played together very much. You could see a situation in which they win 2-0 and it's a successful game, but you could also see a situation in which they concede a goal really early. And so I think it was just sort of you don't know which it's going to be, and it could be that you say, oh, they're going to concede early, and then they score early, and all of a sudden you look foolish. In this situation, I think it was just that maybe they were a little bit uncertain, okay, I think we've got it, and then within the first minute, as you said, they get hit, and it's a little bit whoa, okay, we got to react, and then you're all kind of on your heels right away.
I think Germany just had a plan, stuck to it, and it was 100% correct. I think the plan, maybe we can get into detail on this, but you noticed it, right? It was essentially to have like a real block of midfielders that you can't get past, and then 3 really good centre-backs behind that. And then Mexico tried to pass through that so many times, and eventually Germany would just break and just send their fast players away and hit them on the counter. I don't know how else to describe it. I would also say it was a little bit, it's more complicated than this, but a little bit like the Arrigo Sacchi and Ranieri at Leicester plan, where you don't have a big gap between your defenders and your midfielders, right? The 2 lines stayed pretty tight the whole time, which just did not give Mexico any space to play into. The only option for Mexico seemed to be go down the wing and get a cross in, but the crosses weren't of sufficient quality, and there were too many centre-backs and defensive midfielders waiting in the box to head it away. It just wasn't enough of a weapon for Mexico.
So thank you for bringing that up, because I had that in my notes, but I had completely forgotten that I had it in my notes. I wrote down, like, do Mexico think that Germany are really bad at defending crosses? Like, because I was so surprised by that. That was not what I expected to happen. Maybe a little bit with Jimenez being in there, and then Chicharito, obviously, he's got that vertical jumping ability. Yeah. But as you said, Jimenez would routinely drift out wide, and so it didn't feel like it made sense, because they would be lumping these balls in, and either they wouldn't have the numbers in there, or fairly often it would just be a very bad ball. It would be like to the back post or out of bounds, or like wouldn't get past the first defender. It just seemed like it was sort of, again, it wasn't an intentional plan of, all right, we're going to go down the channels, we'll try to pull Germany out, then we'll put these balls into the box. It felt like, nothing else is working, let's just get this ball in and see what happens.
I think it's all Germany left them with, was you can go on, have a go at attacking down the wing if you want. And even I made sort of minimal notes for this, apart from the goals. One of the notes I made was 22nd minute, Chicharito visibly frustrated with an Alanis cross. Yeah. Because the cross was just too long and too high and didn't get near anyone. And once you're 22 minutes in, I guess you're already 2-0 down as well, which adds to the pressure. But that means the game plan is kind of falling apart, where you're reduced to crosses that Chicharito is very visibly unhappy with.
And that was really surprising to me, because like yesterday in the Chile-Portugal game, I was watching Ronaldo to just see like how long it took him to get really frustrated and start yelling at people. And he would have those little tiny moments of like obvious frustration, but it didn't permeate his game. And it did seem like the Mexico team got really frustrated with each other very quickly, and then they did balance out. Don't get me wrong; they did do really well to fight back and at least pull 1 goal back and make it a little bit more competitive. But it struck me how quickly they were sort of like throwing their hands up in the air and gesturing and kind of blaming each other a little bit.
Can we talk about that German block? Because I think you noticed it, you posted it on Twitter.
I did.
You used the phrase war, which obviously has some very negative connotations that I think you didn't intend. Is that correct?
I did not.
But that really is what it is, right? It was sort of a block or a wall across midfield that they couldn't get past. So I guess, when did you first notice that? And my second question is, which players were in that wall? Because it seemed to me that maybe the genius of it was that it rotated exactly who it was.
Yep. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not even sure who was in it in that screenshot. It just like struck
definitely
me.
Rudy. The only one I'd guarantee was in there was Rudy.
I think that's a safe bet. But I think it struck me just because, like, Mexico, and I said in there, I think this is the reason why Mexico are struggling to have possession. And I got a couple people respond with like, well, they're not struggling to have possession. And I would agree with that.
Meaningful possession.
I think they ended up with like 60% or something like that. But that's the key thing, is meaningful possession. And as you see in that screen cap, if you go to Twitter, you can see it. It's a couple Mexican players, and I don't think there are any other ones on the screen. Like, there's nobody immediately behind that wall of 4. And so even if there were, they would still have to like check in and check back. And if they get that ball, you can bet that there's going to be a defender tracking them, that they're not going to have much time or space. And even if they do get a little bit of space, it's still a risky ball to play through, because then suddenly you've got 4 attackers with the forward ahead of them. Suddenly it's like 5v4 or 5v3, and you can't really risk those like risky, like low percentage balls that might turn into something. So it instead makes you slow down and pass the ball around, and then eventually maybe find some space in the channel, and then eventually have a cross.
And then it gets cleared.
Pretty much.
And I saw Gio dos Santos, Jonathan dos Santos, and Hector Herrera all try and sort of split that line of German midfielders and get it through to a forward. And all of them I saw basically give possession away, because there wasn't enough space to do it. And even if there was, the Germans were very sort of aggressive and athletic about running to cut out the pass. Like, even like Draxler would be back there and he would sprint and intercept, and Goretzka did a lot of the same. So there just really was no way through. And sometimes Germany, to me, were in a 5-4-1. Right? You'd have Hector and Heinrich, the 2 wing backs, all the way back. So you had a back five with the three centre-backs, and then Draxler and Stindl would come back and form that four-man block, and then you'd only leave Timo Werner up front, which is real dangerous because he's really fast and really dribbly. And then I think like if Stindl was forward or Draxler was forward, then maybe like Heinrich or Hector would step out of the back five, leave it as a back four, but make sure there were at least 2 blocks of 4. Right? So they always had at least 8 and often 9.
Yeah, and so and even then that might give off the impression, if you didn't see this game, that Germany were very defensive. And they certainly sat back a little bit and invited Mexico on and then tried to counter on them. But they were definitely aggressive when they got that ball, and they were not like trying to build slowly and try to move the ball around and get everybody in the right position. I mean, you could see that in those first 2 goals.
A counter-attacking team, right?
Yeah, it is very much, we got the ball, let's go, and let's go put it in the back of the net.
And let's spot a Leon Goretzka high-paced run through the middle. That's pretty much what happened, right?
Yeah, I believe that was the second goal. The first goal, it made me... I will say, like, I was kind of rooting for Mexico a little bit, CONCACAF love and whatever.
I wanted to see a Mexico-Chile rematch as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And also, we can maybe talk about this later, I'm a little uncomfortable with Germany winning the Confederations Cup with the B team. Not because there's anything like ethically wrong with that, but just because of what it says about the future of who's going to be the best team in the world by a distance.
Well, they might have their work cut out for them with Chile, but we'll talk about that tomorrow when we preview that game. But for now, I was a little bit pleased, though, just because, again, my prediction was essentially that I thought Mexico would be in a little bit of disarray. Maybe they wouldn't be like 100% positionally certain, and that might cause problems. And in this goal, you could see that they did press forward very, very high. They were trying to put Germany under pressure. And in so doing, they left themselves vulnerable because it basically comes from Moreno comes charging out of the back to win this header. He's trying to keep Germany on their heels, keep Mexico on the attack, but he heads it straight into the path of, I forget the German player.
It's Goretzka. He heads it directly to Goretzka, who ends up scoring it. And that's why I say even for the first goal, he's doing a sprint through the middle because then he's on the end of the pass. Yeah,
you're right.
All hail Leon Goretzka. Schalke are going to win the Bundesliga the next 10 years.
Sure. I think maybe wrong, but who knows? But I think this is like an example of where I think Alanis is going to get blamed because he wasn't out wide. That's where the ball comes. Now he has to like pull wide to try to mark Heinrichs, I believe it was.
Yeah, definitely Heinrichs making that aggressive run down the right.
Yeah, and so because he has to come out wide, now space opens up. But in reality, he's doing the right thing, right? He's come inside because the man who's supposed to be marking and blocking options in the middle has pushed forward to try to win that header. Now Moreno's out of position. He's trying to get back, and he does actually get goal side of Goretzka, but then he spots Julian Draxler at the back post.
Yeah, I like that I've got you doing the Julian instead of Julian.
You do.
Matt Herman from Bundesliga Talk got me. Talking Fußball, the Bundesliga show, got me doing it.
Bundesliga Talk?
It's correct. It's Talking Fußball. It's Bundesliga Talk, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So this gets to...
so then just to finish that, though, he spots Draxler, and so, again, pointing to Mexico not really knowing exactly what to do, he gets caught in between both because he seems like I'm going to try to cut out that ball to the back post, but I'm also going to try to track Goretzka, and he's in between, and that's why Goretzka can just take it cleanly first time with very little pressure.
Very nice finish there, right? Instead of a real good technical finish from Goretzka. To not like swing and hit it hard, but just to have the technique to redirect it, knowing there's enough pace on it. It's a very nice sort of cut-back ball from Heinrich, I want to say. You know what I mean? Like, the obvious ball there is to cross it or to hit it low into the box, but it almost looks awkward the way he rolls it pretty much laterally, but running at full pace.
Yep. I mean,
it looks like he scuffed it and slowed it up accidentally, but I think it's deliberate.
Oh, it's definitely deliberate. He's picking his spot and just trying to put it on frame. And maybe this is an example. I'm sure world-class players don't do this, but it's an example in my mind of like when you're the striker and you just want your first shot to be on target. Like if your first shot is 15 yards over, that's never a great start. So maybe it's sort of like I'm going to hit this instep, I'm going to try to place it. Hopefully it goes in, but if not, at least I put it on frame. Yeah. Oh, it's in the back of the net, and we're 1-0 up inside, 6 minutes? That's not bad.
Yeah. So we talked about Alanis, and you talked about Moreno like being dragged a little bit wide for Draxler, and then sort of seeing Goretzka at the last minute, right? And Moreno actually does a good job of scrambling back after the initial mistake, right? At least to try and get back in something resembling a defensive position. But what this says to me is it's this definite trend I see with German teams and German coaches, because I saw Jurgen Klopp loves to do this, Thomas Tuchel loved to do this at Dortmund last season, and this German team loved to do it, is to make sure that they have someone on the right touchline and someone on the left touchline so that your defense gets spread almost to the point of breaking. I mean, not literally, but figuratively to the point of breaking in this instance, because Alanis has to go left to cover Heinrichs. And then Moreno has to start looking right to cover Draxler. And it just opens up holes and holes and holes and holes. And Goretzka runs into one of those holes.
I agree with you, except that I don't think Moreno has to do that. I think he does that because he realizes, like, wow, there are just guys open all over the place. And again, I think that's him being the veteran and kind of spotting vulnerabilities. But it also points to nobody else was doing it. And so he really, like... Yes, he will probably be blamed for, number one, not winning that header in a better way so that it doesn't go straight to Germany for possession. But he'll probably be blamed for, like, failing to track Goretzka and then, like, drifting a little bit. But in reality, he's trying to do two different jobs at once and ends up getting caught doing neither of them particularly well.
But isn't that like the result of what Germany are doing, where they get enough players forward and spread you out enough that suddenly you are trying to cover too many people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and then if you look at the second goal as well, do you have anything else to say about the first one? All right, cool.
I think we've said enough.
I mean, this one, again, it's like, it comes from a Mexico throw. They have the ball, and it's just, they get put under pressure. It's a bad back pass from, I believe, Jimenez, and then it's a battle between Jonathan Dos Santos, and I forget who else. I can't remember who was battling. Stindl, thank you.
Yeah.
He kind of battles, loses that one, and then Germany are just off to the races. And they don't really give Mexico that much time to get into the right shape and really react. And I say that much because Goretzka starts that run from deep yet again and runs past at least two Mexico players, the most egregious of which being Hector Herrera, who I think maybe turns and looks at the back four as Goretzka goes running by, and then he looks back. So I think he just maybe misses him going. And then by the time he's recognized, wait, something's wrong, again, the ball's in the back of the net.
So I've rewatched this because I'm sure you remember we talked yesterday. I'm kind of semi-obsessed with the idea of Herrera as the defensive midfielder and the pros and cons of that.
Yeah.
And I've watched this enough times to be convinced that he literally does not see Leon Goretzka. Like it's almost like Goretzka is so fast.
Yep.
It's like in a cartoon where like something goes vroom and like Roadrunner and someone hasn't even seen him. But that's not good enough, right? If you're a defensive midfielder, you have to have some awareness of someone running through at pace.
Yeah. No, you do, absolutely. And especially when Moreno's involved again, he steps out to, I believe it's Werner. That's who he steps to and like tries to like dispossess a little bit. But because Moreno stepped again, you've got to be aware if you're that holding midfielder that there's now a gap behind you and you've either got to drop in and cover that or you've at least got to make sure that no one is running into that space because your center back has stepped. And I think that's Moreno maybe trying to play the aggressive game plan that Juan Carlos Osorio had set out, and maybe everybody else was kind of a little bit shell-shocked from that first goal, and so you end up having another gap and no one's really picking up.
And once again, I think this is Heinrich. I'm not sure if Heinrich touches the ball in this play. I don't think he does. But he, being there on the right wing, spreads Mexico out again so that there's the hole that can be, the ball can go through for Goretzka to run onto.
I think that's absolutely it. And I think, again, Mexico, you can't, obviously I fault them for conceding 2 goals in 8 minutes. But it is sort of like you can't really fault them for but you can't. I don't really fault them for not fixing everything after the first goal because the second goal happens like almost immediately. But by the same token, like you do expect there to be a little bit faster of a reaction, and at least we've seen Juan Carlos Osorio do this before, where inside the 3 minutes suddenly they were in a back 3, now they're in a back 4, or they were in a back 4, now they're in a back 3, and suddenly they have 3 holding midfielders or 2 holding midfielders. Like we've seen him react very quickly, and in this first couple, like 10, 15 minutes, they really did, and it took them a little bit of time to be like, wait, something is not working here, and by that point, they were already 2-0 down.
And I would argue, even though Germany don't score until, the 60-something minutes, like 66, no, 58 maybe?
59,
59th, there really wasn't a way back into this game for Mexico, because we talked about this already, right? But even though they had a lot of possession, a lot of crosses, they never actually looked like scoring. And it seemed to me like a matter of time before Germany got that sort of third game that, at that point, right, definitely killed off the game. And I remember at that point thinking, I'll watch the last 30 minutes out of interest, but this is no longer a competition.
I agree. And I think another moment that really spelled that out for me, and we've been in these games before when it's just like, oh, it's just not going in today. And obviously it ends up going in, but Chicharito, right at the end of the first half, I believe it was, has the kind of 1v1 situation you kind of expect him to score from there, and instead he puts it over the bar, just kind of like lobs it over the bar. And it absolutely felt in that moment like, oh no, this is one of those, like they're going to get clean, even when they get clean through opportunities, they're still not going to take them, or Ter Stegen is going to pull off some good saves. You just kind of felt like right there that like that would have been a totally different game if they go into halftime 2-1 down. You concede 2 in the first 8 minutes, but then you fight back and get 1. Now the second half is all to play for. But instead, your kind of head hangs even further down because you're like, well, I can't even score.
And I will say the third goal, which we're calling the backbreaker, basically, right?
Yeah.
Alanis kind of is at fault for this one because he's the one that keeps Hector onside when Hector makes that run through. And Timo Werner is even offside beyond that, or in an offside position beyond that. But it doesn't matter, right? Because once the ball's cut back to him, it doesn't matter that he was offside when Hector received the ball.
The way Werner reacts to this, did you expect there to be video assistant referee involved in this?
No, because once I saw the replay, I knew that everybody was onside correctly.
I guess what I mean is right away, just the way he stopped and looked at the linesman like, really? Oh, okay. I'll go celebrate then. I just okay, we're gonna get a replay, and maybe it's gonna be that situation when the goalkeepers come out, and so there's only one defender back, and so he is technically offside. And then as you said, the first replay, I was just Alanis, you poor man.
Isn't it ironic?
But I'd say he is not. Oh, really? We're going to keep that going?
No, that's the last one, I promise. But I'll put one hand in my pocket so I don't do it again. Are there crickets on that end of the Is this thing on?
Take my wife, please. Was that where we're going? You just flew in and bore your arms tired? All right, Benny Youngman. So I would also add, though, that while you are correct that it's Alanis that keeps everybody on side for this one, it would also be Loew for both this goal and the fourth goal. If you watch it, just this poor Mexico defense, that he just clearly does not know what's being asked of him, and so he is tucked inside. It seems as though Juan Carlos Osorio has told them, look, let them have the ball wide, just don't let them come through the middle, don't get caught on the break, block that middle and make sure they can't just stream through. And both the third and the fourth goal, Loew is tucked all the way in, to the extent that on the fourth goal, Hector Moreno points at Younes and screams. You can see him pointing and gesturing, and Loew is still wait, what? I should go to him, the guy who's wide open 12 yards from goal. Okay, fine. It just seemed like everybody didn't want to be the one to make the mistake at that point. And once you have everybody sort of being not me, I didn't do it, then you're obviously not functioning at tip-top level.
So, so I have something I want to talk about with Germany, but sort of a final question on Mexico.
Yeah.
What could Osorio have done differently with the benefit of hindsight? Assuming this German team goes out the same way it did, with three at the back and really good, aggressive, fast wing backs. 3-4-3 essentially is what they played, right? You can quibble with it, but what would you have done if you were Juan Carlos Osorio and you got to rerun this game? I'm thinking Time Machine, Quantum Leap, Doctor Who type thing here.
I mean, again, I am not I think I have a D license. I do not have the A license that would be necessary.
Well, no, I mean, obviously Osorio is a more experienced and better coach than either of us. But
but okay.
Thought experiment. What could he have done differently?
We saw Alanis didn't really work as a left back, and so you can make the argument that either number one, you go with a back three. And then maybe you start...
That was my suggestion, right? Get Rafa Marquez in there.
And you start Rafa Marquez, and then you have Marquez and Herrera, and now you've kind of got a bit more solid base through the middle, and maybe that gives you a little bit more to work with. And then I think, that's the second part, is that routinely we would see a situation. That's why at one point I was like, they're in a 4-1-3-2, because Herrera is so often the only one there. And you had made that point, that if you only have Hector Herrera there, sometimes he might switch off, but even if he doesn't, it's still one guy, and Germany came out in a 3-4-2-1. That is not a great numbers matchup, and so I think that would be the other one, is to start. Yeah,
he's not Moses. He can't stop the flood.
And again, this is where I've already seen people saying why wouldn't you bring more defensive midfielders, especially if you have very exciting, talented attackers who you can't play, because you have so many of them and some of them don't work together. So that would be the other aspect of it, is maybe balance the lineups a little bit better. And then I think the one that he's probably going to get really slated for is not playing Carlos Vela.
Yes. I think so. One of the and Fabian doesn't start, right? Comes off the bench and scores that incredible goal. I honestly feel like one of the problems with Mexico is they have too many attacking players who, when you look at them in isolation, you think they should definitely start for Mexico.
Yep.
But you suddenly end up with 7 of those players, or 8 or 9 or 10 of those players, and it's just impossible, right? You can't start Lozano and Dam and Aquino all on the left wing.
Yeah.
And you can't start Vela on the right and then also have Chicharito and Jimenez in the middle. Right. And then Peralta is another option, right? Good in the air, striker coming off the bench. Didn't play in this game, I don't think. There's just too many options that it feels like... To give sort of an excuse to Osorio, it always feels like you get it wrong, because you always have to leave out someone who's really, really good. And then if you lose, you can say, you should have played him instead.
Yeah. So, I think that's definitely a part of it. And then as you were talking, I remembered the obvious number one thing he is definitely already getting criticized for is starting Giovanni Dos Santos.
Yeah, that does seem like, with all respect to Gio, maybe a luxury player when you should have gone with some like more tougher, hard-bitten midfielders.
Yeah, and I also just think that like he tried. He certainly worked a lot and was all over the place, but I don't think he was the effective and efficient kind of link-up player you need if you're going to have him as a number 10 running the midfield and connecting like defense to midfield to attack and just kind of being that player that can lubricate things when they get a little bit rusty. He seemed more like he was kind of all over the place and was being a little bit profligate with his chances. And so, yeah, I think that's the other one you're going to see is Juan Carlos Osorio get criticized for playing Gio Dos Santos, if not Jonathan Dos Santos as well.
Yeah, okay. I think the other one is Diego Reyes. I know was
the
injured.
Other one. We've just picked apart their whole team.
Diego Reyes was injured, I think, and couldn't play. But I know he can play centre-back or maybe right-back or maybe defensive midfield. So he would have been valuable, but he wasn't available to Osorio. Right. But it all comes back to put more defensive midfielders on your roster and then you don't end up with a shortage.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah.
that's
almost... Actually, I think I've hit on it. The thing of having too many attacking players, maybe there were just too many to begin with on the roster. And maybe you should have sacrificed one of the wingers for another left back or one of the wingers or one of the strikers for another defensive midfielder.
Yeah, but we're also approaching this from the perspective of like you it sounds ludicrous to say out loud. Like you put your best 11 on the field and that's what you do. And that's not what Juan Carlos Osorio does. We know he's going to rotate, like regardless of situation. It's the sort of the Pep Guardiola goalkeeper plays out of the back thing. I'm going to rotate my people. I'm not going to start the same guy every single time. I want to, keep it going. And with that can come uncertainty and a lack of familiarity. So I think that's the other thing is we still have this idea of like, oh, you do this and you do this and you play this guy again and you play him in all 4 games and suddenly you're golden. And that's just not what he's going to do.
True. Okay, shall we switch to Germany?
Oh, did they win this game?
They certainly won this game. 4-1. We've talked a little bit about how they did it and what they did.
Yeah.
The thing I'm really interested in is this idea of picking an experimental roster for the Confederations Cup. They essentially, here's what I've just realized they did. The roster that the US and Mexico picks for a Gold Cup in a Confederations Cup year, Germany picked that for the Confederations Cup in a Confederations Cup year.
Yeah.
This is Germany's Gold Cup roster.
If I were to be cynical for just a moment, I would say that you could make the argument that this isn't the strongest iteration of the Confederations Cup we've ever seen.
Why is that then?
So I would argue that if you look at who Germany got, they got Australia, who have been in a bit of disarray. They are like I know they're still in with a shout of qualification, but they're definitely not performing at the peak that we've seen Australia do in the past, where they are just automatically qualifying. They're going to be in there no matter what. So
I'm not familiar with the Asian qualification setup. I know Iran are through. I don't know how Australia are doing.
I can't remember what the issue is exactly, but I remember.
The playoffs, aren't they? Because they're a potential opponent for the US. Yes, okay.
But more so, I mean that at the time that there was a story about how like South Korea were also struggling. There was a whole big not expose necessarily, but article about how Australia have a lot of problems behind the scenes and that there's been gaps in talent development, and so they're struggling a little bit, both as the senior national team and as a federation. So there's that element. Cameroon won the African Cup of Nations with a team that most people weren't that excited about. They don't have that star power anymore, which isn't always the biggest issue, but by all accounts, it was a Cameroon team that there wasn't a lot of expected of. They ground out results. They found a way to win. But that's not this team that's going to electrify and really terrify you the way we've seen some African teams in the Confederations Cup before. You have Chile, who they drew, and Chile are obviously very good, and then you get Mexico with injuries and a little bit of instability and maybe a little bit of uncertainty because of Juan Carlos Osorio. So there is also the argument that maybe this has not been the strongest challenge for this German team.
Do you know what? The other big thing is that the hosts were terrible at soccer.
Yeah. Yep.
So the last Confederations Cup was hosted by Brazil, right? So that's pretty impressive. This one hosted by Russia, who did not have a great tournament, went out in the group stage. So I would agree with that. I also, honestly, I think that this is a very good idea. What Joachim Loew has done is a brilliant idea.
Oh, yeah.
Because the path to the German first choice roster is obviously blocked because there are so many great players in there. And yet there are guys like Leon Goretzka at 22 years old at Schalke who are going to struggle to get into that, especially starting 11, but even the roster. So you give them a chance at a major tournament that doesn't matter really if you don't do so well. Plus, this occurred to me, all the first choice guys, your Thomas Mullers and all those guys, have been given the summer off. So they don't play back-to-back summers before the 2018 World Cup.
Or back-to-back-to-back. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, because the Euros. Yeah.
Yeah, which, and I know people are always sort of like, come on, like really 3 tournaments in 3 years is a lot. But it is when you've got an entire club season in between. And that club season, I mean, the Europa League started today. Now, none of the German senior team are playing in Europa right now. But it still is like, it doesn't really stop. Like, it keeps going. Like, they're going to be back in preseason pretty soon. And so, so I think there's definitely that element of you give those guys a rest. But you also remind them that there is talent behind them. And that was a thing that at least my commentator was bringing up early, that Joachim Loew had said all he wants is competition. He wants competition for his players. And when I first heard that, I think it came either just before or just after they had scored. And I took it as like, oh, he's saying like he wants really good teams to compete against so that he can really challenge his players. And obviously what he meant is that he wants there to be competition for every single spot, because if you've got 3 guys competing for one spot, everyone's going 100% and no one is really coasting and kind of like resting on their laurels.
And I guess someone like Rudy, you maybe wouldn't think of as a starting player for Germany, but suddenly it's not inconceivable at all, is it?
Nope. It certainly isn't. I mean, but by the same token, it's also not inconceivable that he doesn't make that squad. That's a lot of negatives in there. I apologize, but it's just
I'll work it out later when I listen back.
It points to depth, and it points to maybe Das Reboot was a good thing.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. Okay, so the final is Germany-Chile, which actually I wanted Mexico-Chile. This is still a good game, right?
Oh, it is?
We'll preview...
You're willing to watch this, are you?
I'm willing.
What a noble sacrifice. Thank you, Daryl.
So this is on Sunday. We'll watch this, obviously, and review it. And we'll do a preview tomorrow, Friday. We'll do a preview of this game. There's also the Gold Cup warm-up, USA-Ghana.
Yep.
That game is Saturday. I think you said 4:15 kickoff, more or less.
I don't think I said that. I think someone else told you that, because
Phil said that.
You're planning to do a brewery bike tour.
Yeah, so we'll review that on Sunday when we're not biking and brewing.
So I do a view behind the curtain there. First of all, this was a USA-Ghana friendly that we totally remembered and absolutely knew was coming, and didn't text yesterday to say, oh no, that's this weekend. And so I just enjoy that you had made all these plans for this brewery bike tour, and then you remembered the Ghana game, and Phil told you it's 4:15, and you sort of slowly looked at me, and I think your response was, record Sunday? So we're recording Sunday, basically.
Let's pull that curtain back in place so no one else can see anything.
Yeah.
And we'll say yes. Our USA-Ghana review will be out on Sunday in conjunction with our Confederations Cup final review. And we'll have the preview for both out on Friday.
Is plan.
All good?
Is plan.
We should also mention, okay, I haven't seen this game, but FC Cincinnati knocked the Chicago Fire out of the US Open Cup, and Mitch Hildebrandt apparently had an almost Claudio Bravo. I saw the numbers. It wasn't 3 saves in a row, right? But it was 3 penalty shootout saves out of 4 for Cincinnati keeper Mitch Hildebrandt.
It was, and 10 saves in the game. I saw one he made late on, I think in overtime, extra time, whichever you prefer. And it was a very good save to keep it level, because it's just sort of a player coming in at a tight, not even a tight angle, but it's just he has to react very quickly and get down very quickly. Gets a couple fingers to it probably, and puts it out for a corner. But yeah, it was very impressive from him, and obviously from the whole Cincinnati team.
So, yeah, we haven't been able to watch the game so we can offer any analysis, but we do want to offer congratulations.
We do. And that was a rowdy atmosphere. So credit to that. As I said in Goalmouth today, the number 2 attendance ever for a U.S. Open Cup game.
Wow. So it's like 30-something thousand for FC Cincinnati and Chicago Fire.
And just in case, on the off chance, Dale Grove, that you haven't yet had the opportunity to listen to the Goalmouth yet.
I have not.
They drew Miami FC, who also won. They knocked out Atlanta United 3-2 with a goal in the 93rd minute. So a lot of drama. But Miami and Cincinnati will be playing against each other, which means you'll have one non-MLS team in the semifinals.
Wow. Okay. So the NASL, right?
Which is the first time since 2011, and I want to say that team in 2011 was the Richmond Kickers. Am I right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, they beat Sporting KC, and I think they lost to Chicago Fire in the end.
Sigh,
indeed. But still, that was great for the Kickers.
It was.
Okay, so congrats to FC Cincinnati and to Alessandro Nesta, I believe is the coach, and Miami FC. Proves you can put the FC at the beginning or the end, and you still go far in the US.
It did feel that way. There was a lot of FCs in there.
All right, so congrats also to Germany on a very impressive performance.
Yeah, them too.
Taylor and I will be back tomorrow with our Confed Cup final, as the kids call it, preview, and USA Ghana friendly preview. Till then, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again on Friday.
You gotta slice it.